Hello, everyone. Welcome to Proper Pruning. I'm Ann Perkowski. I'm a master gardener with Cornell Cooperative Extension in Westchester. This is one of my favorite pruned gardens. This is Great Dixter in England, a world famous garden. Beautiful pruning, but this is not the type of pruning we're going to talk about today. So, okay, and I'll go through it quickly. So if you want to take notes, might be a good idea. So why prune? To remove dead, diseased, and broken branches, to remove undesirable growth, to create strong structure, control size, influence fruit and flowering, rejuvenate old plants, prevent damage to life and property, very important, shape plants in artificial forms, fences, espaliers, topiaries, just get into that a little bit at the end. Okay, I'll talk about trees in the beginning. I don't prune trees. I'm not a certified arborist. However, I do refer to trees, and this is a book that was written by Edward Gilman, who is a professor of horticulture at the University of Florida. And it is probably the textbook if you're training to become a certified arborist. And it's also, since I first looked at this book, started teaching this class at the New York Botanical Gardens 10 years ago, it was just a textbook. Now it is a website, and Ed Gilman has put so much on this website, I think, to kind of alleviate a lot of the poor pruning in trees that we see all the time. I certainly see it all the time. So if you want to know about pruning trees, it's a very good resource. And I would suggest you take a look at it. It's great videos, great PowerPoints, and okay, I'll give you a little bit of what is on it. Okay, so these are poor formed trees, weak codominant stems, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Leaning trees, most foliage on one side, a one-sided canopy, maybe the sun only gets to one side, branches at the top of small live crown ratio, weak double trunks of a evergreen, and dead top branches, which I find often is because trees aren't watered well in the first 3 years. You have to make sure you keep your new plants watered, and that goes for any kind of plant. Okay, good form trees, one main trunk, main branches on the lower half of the canopy, a high live crown ratio, live foliage at the top, one trunk of an evergreen, branches spaced well apart, one trunk and small diameter branches, and one trunk, again, the main branches spaced well apart on a little larger tree. So the tree structure, the single leader habit is the strongest versus the multiple leader habit. And the reason, is because the branches are attached in a fashion that they are more right angle to the main trunk. And let's see if I have, this is a better attachment than, say, this attachment, which is a narrow crotch, they call it, and it is a weaker attachment to the main trunk, or often a main parent branch. So, and why are multiple leaders bad? Well, because they have codominant stems, and codominant stems can be at the base of a tree, or this could be this type of branch arrangement could be up in the canopy of a tree, and it is because there are two branches that were at one time apart, and now they have grown together, and this is what it looks like in between the two branches. There is a branch with bark on the outside, and another where it meets another branch with bark on the outside, or at one time it was the outside, and then those two branches that were at one time separate grew together, and in between where they grow together is a gap. And that's where the weakness forms, because if there is weight on one side, snow, ice, this is where they split. So, and those are called codominant stems. And there's two types of codominant stems. And basically, codominant stems are branches growing at the same rate with the same diameter, originating from the same location. The weaker of the two codominant stems is this V formation. The stronger is a U formation. These also are codominant stems, but this has a stronger habit than that. Okay, so how to prevent codominant stems? Well, you do not allow branches to grow more than 1/2 of the diameter of the trunk. So if this is a young tree, a tree you've purchased, a tree that's relatively young in your yard, you would choose the main leader and you would cut back these other side leaders that are growing at the same rate, at the same time, the same diameter. And by cutting these back, you're slowing it down. And now you have one dominant stem and these are subordinated. So you choose the main leader, you would choose something that would be right in the middle and then prune the others back. Okay, so big trunk, smaller branches are a better form. And this is another ideal look of a proper habit on the branches of a tree. They're spaced well apart, and that's because of pruning. It probably didn't grow this way, but there's a branch here, and then going up the trunk, there's a branch here and a branch going around the other side, and then upward is a branch. And most likely there have been little branches that have been removed in between. So you have branches going all the way around the tree and they're healthy. And because you have removed some, the ones that are left are stronger. And also here's the right angle. It's not a narrow crotch. The branches are at more like a right angle to the trunk. So maybe in these few minutes, you can look at this and you could see that there are codominant stems here. These are weakly attached. That's a very large branch and it's not well attached to the tree. So, okay. So what should I cut? So always remove diseased and dead wood. Prune back codominant stems, as I just said. Removing interfering branches that grow together. Remove branches that grow into the center of the tree. Remove suckers and some water sprouts. Suckers are always from the roots, and water sprouts are within the canopy. And I'll explain a little bit about what those are a little later. And if necessary, the lower limbs should be gradually removed. But from what I've learned from, again, University of Florida's website, tremendous amount of information being offered to the public, to homeowners, consumers, and to certified arborists. Remove your lower limbs gradually. They actually strengthen the tree. So don't be so quick to remove those lower limbs that may be in the way. but remove no more than 1/3 of live wood per year. So you could remove all the dead wood, but anything else, no more than 1/3 per year. And sometimes it's even less. So if a arborist comes to your property to see a tree that might need some pruning because you're concerned or you're just aesthetically, there are 3 types of cuts that arborists will talk about. The first is a removal cut, and that removes a branch from the trunk or parent branch. So it's the largest cut, and it often is a branch that is interfering with the light, which just with other branches, maybe it's rubbing on other branches, which is not good. So an arborist will make a removal cut, this is a picture from the New York Botanical Gardens. I guess maybe you can imagine there was a branch there at one time, and this is definitely a removal cut. It's taking a branch from the main trunk. And I just thought that since this was the New York Botanical Gardens, they certainly must have considered this as a good pruning cut. However, I will say I was there this weekend and this tree doesn't exist anymore, as far as I can tell. So maybe that didn't work over time, or maybe they were concerned that that was just removing too much from the tree. But anyway, this is an illustration of a removal cut. Then there's the smaller reduction cut, which this should say type 2 of 3. So, which is taking the weight off of some branches. It's not removing quite as much. It's reducing the length of a branch back to a lateral branch of 1/2, which is preferred, to 1/3 of its size. So let me see if I could get to, okay, so this is off of also the University of Florida's website, and they're showing you how they did removal cuts on this, what looks like a relatively young tree. And I will say, letting trees, being very concerned about codominant stems is mostly on trees that will mature at 30 feet or above in size. You're not going to be concerned about a small Japanese maple having codominant stems or a red bud, but your sugar maples, your oaks, those are the trees that you're going to be concerned about pruning early. So maybe you can see they made a cut right here. Well, since this is being recorded, you can go back and look, but they basically thinned it out. And I will add this picture, which I saw locally, which is not a good pruning cut, but it's the type of cut I do see a lot. And this is not removing a branch, which was probably here, back to a branch that is 1/3 or 1/2 the size of what's left. This is much too small to remove it back to. I'm not a certified arborist at all, but I would think that it might have been proper to either take it down to here or maybe just remove the entire tree, which an arborist will tell you sometime. It could be that they were trying to, escape the power lines there, but the illustration is more like this is not strong enough of a branch, big enough of a branch to make that, to cut off to that point. So, and I will say, to find a certified arborist in your area, go to the International Society of Arboriculture, the ISA, and they have a website, and you can plug in your zip code and it will bring up all the certified arborists in your area. Okay, the last type of cut is a heading cut, which I often refer to as like the Con Ed cut, which we know this was done, very often to clear power lines, and It's just the worst cut. You shouldn't top trees at all. It's will probably doom them at some point. But yes, that's a heading cut, which is not a proper cut, but it is identified as a heading cut. So, and the only heading cuts that are really proper is the type you'd see in England, Europe a lot is pollarding of trees. And I just put in a picture of that. That is a heading cut. You're topping it, but what they do is, it goes back for centuries. They used to do this to harvest the wood because new wood would grow every year and they'd use it. But this has to be kept maintained, pruned back every year. So that's just the only reason that a heading cut would be proper. Okay, this was a picture I saw locally, also beautiful dogwood, obviously sheared on top, not properly pruned, not thinned out, not removal cuts, reduction cuts. This was just heading cuts. And once this is done, it's really hard to get that back to its natural shape, which is quite beautiful. This is a native shrub. And but this happens a lot. So okay, so where and how to make the cut. Alex Scheigo, which I'll read a little bit about him. Alex Scheigo was a plant pathologist and biologist who worked for the U.S. Forest Service as chief scientist. This was back in the 1940s, 50s, 60s. He studied trees for most of his adult life and researched how branches develop and grow. Most importantly, he helped understand how branch tissue is distinct from trunk tissue, and each develops in layers to provide strength. Okay, and that is called CODIT, compartmentalization of decay in trees, and this is followed throughout the world now. Okay, so branches put on their own tissue every year, as well as the trunk puts on its own, I'm saying this right. Okay, annual overlapping of branch and trunk wood. It's a distinct swelling on the bottom, sides, and top of a branch base. So that's what's the collar. And it's basically a swelling that if you tomorrow when you go out and look at some of your trees, most of them have a collar. Some of them won't, but where you cut is outside the collar, because cutting through the collar now exposes that branch and trunk tissue to disease. It will close properly if you prune it here. So, okay, there's another illustration of a just modest collar, but there is one there where branch tissue and trunk tissue have overlapped. And if you prune it outside, you're in the danger-free zone. That will compartmentalize and close over time. And this is the way it will look after some time. This is the way it closes. The wound closes, as opposed to flush cuts going through the collar. And now you're opening up the rest of the tree, the branches, the trunk, to disease, fungus, pests. It will not close properly. And as we saw here, properly closed, compartmentalized branches usually form a donut-like circle, and the improper ones are shapes like this. So, okay, and the way you remove a tree branch, if you were to do that, I wouldn't recommend that naturally. If it was a heavy branch, have an arborist do it, but you make an undercut first, and then you take the weight off the end, making your second cut further out, so that if that branch gives way and starts to tear, it won't tear any further than your undercut. Okay, so now you've cut off this end and you have, then you make your final cut outside the collar. And this is pretty widely known within, well, all this is another reason for using a certified arborist, because they know how to make proper cuts, not flush cuts. Okay, so you have a mature tree, which is pruned differently than a immature tree that hasn't reached the maturity. So what can you prune on a mature tree? And this is just an oversight. You could study this more on the University of Florida website, but primary branches you really shouldn't remove. Secondary branches, a branch off of the main branch, also almost never remove. Tertiary branches, which branch off of a branch off of a branch, they're careful consideration to remove those, mostly because if you were to remove this parent branch off of the main trunk, it may not close properly. It's too large. So that is one of the main reasons. Naturally, if it's a matter of safety, well, you either have to take it off, or an arborist would tell you you have to take down the whole tree. So, but mostly what they do with mature trees is take the weight off of the branches, and you do that by taking the ends of the branches off. So yes, it would be more time consuming for an arborist to work her way around the tree, taking the weight off of the branches, mostly at the end. And even here, you see here you have a codominant stem in the canopy of the tree. So this is where you might want to prune back one so it's to slow it down, but you would have to prune it further out into the tree than right here. So okay, all right. That's mostly on trees. Okay, so tools. I always like talking about tools because people like to know what kind of tools we use. And we do have our favorites. The tool we use most often is secateurs, and the bypass type of secateurs, which is a blade passing another side here, which is not a blade, and by passing it bypasses it. It cuts the branch or whatever you have in there. Yeah, we particularly like the ARS secateurs because they seem to be the strongest. Their Philcos are really good too, but we found the open spring in the ARS just makes them less likely to stick. Okay, the next, and always get yourself a holster. They're not expensive, but it's preferred over making a cut and pulling a branch out and leaving your secateurs on the ground where they would get soil and pick up diseases and so on. So just get a holster. The back of them can either clip in your pocket, which is what we use, or go onto a belt. So okay, then, and we use that in our front pocket. In our back pocket, we have a folding pocket saw. The variety we like is the Silky Pocket Boy, and it's the medium teeth, I believe, and 130 millimeter, I believe. But that's the size we like. Silky makes this brand, the medium teeth are best for shrubs. They have smaller teeth, I think, for woodworking, or larger teeth for trees, mostly trees. But we like this one that just fits nicely in your pocket. And this has double teeth, made in Japan, very strong steel. It works on the pull. Saw it back and forth naturally, but the way it cuts is on the pull. And we find we we don't replace the blades that often. So certainly you can replace the blade, and the replaceable blades are not that expensive, and you can certainly do it yourself. And with all the cutting we do, we only replace the blades maybe once, twice a year. I do like these gloves because I wash them every time I have a pruning. Every time we do pruning, I come home and I wash the gloves, and this way I'm not taking disease from one property to another. So, and these washable nitrine, I think they're Atlas or something, they stand up to multiple washings. This is also we don't use hedge clippers that often, except if it's on boxwood that maybe people want into a sphere shape. These are, really good for that. Again, ARS, very strong steel, don't need to sharpen it much. But if you do use these on boxwood, I wouldn't use them on woody plants because you can kind of ruin the blade. So I think this is a great tool. I saw this in Gardens Illustrated magazine as a favorite tool of a head gardener in England. And if you're cutting ornamental grasses, and you don't have an easy way, if you're just using clippers or hedge trimmers, this scythe, or it's also a rice clipper, rice cutter. It's great, great for cutting ornamental grasses as well as weeding. It's a great weeder tool, which, by the way, when you weed, you should not be digging up the weed. You should just be cutting it at its base. Something I learned. And here's a sharpener. I'll say I have a couple of favorite websites that talk about, or videos that show how to sharpen your tools. One would be this company, Nowaki. They have a video on how to sharpen your tool. I think Monty Don in Gardener's World has a pretty good video on how to sharpen your tools. So, and watch a couple of them, and you'll get the knack of it. Okay, loppers we don't use that often at all. They don't fit in our pocket, so we don't use them. They're not as precise, but I know people like them. If you're going to get a pair, stick with a lightweight one, because most likely if you're going to use it a lot, the heavier ones just are tiring after a while. This pruning stick, when we have to get, something that's way above our head, something small, but still above our head. This is a Home Depot tool, which we like. It's pretty good. Fiskars, I believe it is, pruning stick. And ARS also makes another one with a trigger handle, which we like a lot, but this one is more readily available. An orchard ladder can be great because you can get close into a shrub. It only has one back leg as opposed to two, so we could put it into a big hedge of boxwood and be right on top of it, if you didn't need that. Okay, so shrub pruning basic cuts. So, okay, let's see. When you make your cut, you're not going to be too far away from the bud, or this could be a branch or a little leaf node, but a leaf node or branch or bud. But this is, you're going to try to cut on an angle. This is a little too far from the bud. This is too close to the metabolism of the bud. This is what you should be looking for, to be a quarter of an inch above where you're pruning. And you're going to prune at an angle and away from the bud, so that if there is runoff, it's not going to land on the bud. Okay, next is leaf arrangements. Most plants fall into one of three categories of leaf arrangements: alternate, which is one on a leaf to the left, to the right, to the left, to the right. And this could be also a branch, or it could be a little bud. The next, this is probably the most common. Next most common is opposite, where leaves are opposite each other on the stem. And then finally, whorled, which would be like a rhododendron where you have several, sometimes 5 leaves coming out of one place on the stem. So, okay, so how do you prune alternate leaf arrangement? You would cut to an, let's say this is your shrub here, and you have a branch here and here and here and here. Let me see if I could move this up a little bit. Yeah. Okay, so you are going to look for an outward facing bud and try to cut there. And on, you're going to make your slanted cut 1/4 of an inch above your outward facing bud. And, or it could be a branch here. But this is where you would cut, because you want to encourage this branch or this bud to grow outside the shrub. If I were to cut here to an inward facing bud, then this is going to grow. Where you cut is where it's going to grow. So this would start to grow, and it would wind up being a crossing branch, which is, as you'll see, it's not something you want. So just tuck that one away. When you're out there, it may sound a little confusing now, but when you're out there, you're going to be looking for outward facing buds or branches to cut to, not inward facing. Okay. And okay, for opposite leaf arrangements, you're going to cut right above where the leaves come out. And this dotted line is a little high, but it should be right above. And from where you cut, these two will grow. And I will say, most of the time when you make that pruning cut, expect growth from 6 to 8 inches from where you make the cut. So if you have let's say a rhododendron with a green leaves only at the very end of a branch that might be, I don't know, 4 feet long, if you cut the tip of it off, only 6 to 8 inches of growth will appear from where you cut. So if the branch is bare going back 4 feet, maybe there's only greenery at the end, it's only going to green up at the end. So what I would suggest, and you'll see in some pictures, sometimes you have to go much further back to get it to green up in the middle of a shrub. But anyway, let's move on. For whorled cuts, you would cut right above the whorl, sort of like the opposite leaf. Okay, and where you cut is where it will grow. So it's best to cut inside the shrub. So rather than pruning on the very outside of it, go deep. Try to go deeper into the shrub than you probably have been used to. That's what I hear all the time when I give pruning classes or I give pruning lessons. Most people say, oh, I would never have taken that much off. So, but we go deep inside the shrub. When you're taking out that branch that you've cut, it now opens up the shrub to more light, and it's going to grow from in here, you know, versus on the outside, which I will show you. But okay, so good cuts versus bad cuts, selective pruning. So here's your shrub, and let's say someone comes along with a hedge trimmer and just trims the top. And now it's shorter, but before long, where you cut is where it's going to grow, so it's going to go right back up to where it was before. So this might be quicker, but selective hand pruning, this is called non-selective because you're not selecting where, you're cutting 100 stems at once, let's say, and 100 stems will grow just where you cut them. The better way to cut would be, to go deep, as I was saying, deep into the shrub to find a healthy branch to cut it to. And then this may take longer, but it will last longer. It will last a year, maybe two, before you have to prune again if you've cut deep into the shrub. Okay, so what you want is this, not that. So how do you achieve that? So how to get started pruning? So you look at a shrub, this shrub needs pruning. Where do I start? Always start with the dead. Take out all of the dead, and sometimes if you haven't pruned in a long time, that could take you, I don't know, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, but often maybe that's enough. It's just your shrub will look much better if a lot of dead wood has accumulated. But then you start counting for your no more than 1/3 of live wood. So you take out crossing branches, and you have to step back and look at it to see sometimes the crossing branch is growing in the wrong direction. And maybe all the branches are vertical and some of them are horizontal. Well, you would take out the horizontal ones. Branches that are excessive, maybe two growing right next to each other, choose the stronger one, prune the other one out. Thinner than a pencil, more crowded, and again, no more than 1/3 of live wood per year. And step back and look often. Think air circulation, allow sunlight to penetrate the center. You want to, most times with a deciduous shrub that loses its leaves, you want to be able to see through the shrub with a fine symmetrical structure. The apex is usually in the middle and the sides taper down. It's just the way things grow. So the tallest is always in the middle, and create definition between shrubs. So they shouldn't really overlap each other. Make sure there's a gap in between. I like to say that look at the shrub, split it visually down the middle, and when you're done, the left side should mirror the right side. They should look similar. Okay, Plant Habit. This is our favorite pruning book, Cass Turnbull's Guide to Pruning, which it's the only book I recommend. I have every pruning book that's out there, but this is very just conversational, funny. She has great videos online. You could go to YouTube, and sadly she passed away a number of years ago, but she has this book, which is what I'm teaching you. It's her method. And look up Cass Turnbull's garden, let's see, her web YouTube channel. Very good instructional videos. Okay, so she puts all plants into one of three categories, all shrubs, I should say. Mounding, cane growing, mounding, which are blobs, she calls them, cane growing, which canes that grow from the ground, or tree-like, the more specimen rhododendrons, amelanchier, shrubs, but they look like trees, and each require a unique pruning approach. So here's the first type, which is a mounding type, a spirea, and let's see, what do you do? Okay, so they're more wide than tall. They're used in mass plantings, and they have the biggest pruning budget. You could take out, quite a lot out of these. Try not to go more than 1/3, but sometimes you can, and they're fine. For instance, a spirea, boxwood, yew, holly, potentilla. These are all mounding type shrubs. And what do? First, the dead. Take out all the dead, and then you can start counting towards your 1/3. Take out the branches that are too thin. Take out the oldest, fattest branches, and you're choosing between these. Taking out the tallest branches. Maybe it's blocking a window, so follow the tallest branch down into the center of the shrub and prune it out from within the center of it, not the highest point. Crossing branches, take out and cut it to where it meets a healthy bud or branch going in the right direction. Okay, so some pictures might help. This is taken at the Botanical Gardens where they do impeccable pruning. This is a spirea before. Whoops, there we go. And here's a spirea after. So as you can see, the branches are, there's really not much dead wood here. This one you could tell that maybe you can tell the two different color woods. One is more gray, obviously older. Then the newer wood is more brown. They've clipped the top. They have probably hedge clipped this or just clipped the top, which spireas is one of the few shrubs that you can do that way. And that's how it looks. And not a lot of crossing branches, not much dead at all. And this is a Ilex reserve, great plant, nice evergreen. It doesn't need a lot of pruning, but let's say if we wanted to make it smaller, this is what you would do. These indicate the branches that are sticking out from the canopy. Follow them in to where it meets a healthy branch and cut it off. The next longest one, follow it into the interior of the canopy, cut it off, and vary your cuts. Some cuts might be shallow, some may be deeper. Sometimes you can take a really thick old one out. What we do often is we're not sure whether we're taking out too much and we're going to leave a big hole. Work with a partner. We do this a lot. We will hold down a branch and just say, if I took this out, how would it look? And most times it's fine. Your partner says it looks fine, take it out. So, but it's hard to do when you're working alone. So working with a partner sometimes can be helpful. And in the end, then you've got a smaller shrub. This is not heading cuts here. This has just been thinned out. So the shrub is now smaller. And this is an abelia, which looks like it's been sheared sort of. Where would you cut on that? Take the tallest branch, follow it into the interior, cut it. And this is maybe not such a great picture, but again, tallest branch, follow it into, my cursor's not moving, but into the interior of the shrub, cut it and follow the tallest branches, the oldest branches. This is after getting out all the dead, and cut it. In the end, you have more of transparent shrub. This is another boxwood, you could say, is a mounding shrub. Also, this is done with hedge clippers. A little hard to do. Take off a little bit at a time. Don't take off a lot. If you need to go back and do a second layer, you can do that. Use the sharpest hedge clippers you can. And this takes some experience to get this technique down. But of course, it's beautiful. It looks really nice. That's a topiary. Okay, next category, cane growing shrubs. What are they? They are canes that grow from the ground. They're more tall than wide. Vase-like, they can be coppiced, which means cut completely to the ground if you need to. They have a mid-sized pruning budget. So what would that be? Forsythias, red twig dogwoods, beautyberries, iteas, hydrangea macrophyllus, and what do you prune? Always first the dead, then you would prune out the, I'm always going to say the same thing, the shrub, the branches that are too thin, the branches that are oldest and fattest, look to take those out. Maybe the tallest branch you want to take out, crossing branches, and you would cut those to the ground or cut inside to a healthy branch or bud, but again, no more than 1/3 of live wood per year. So I think this is a good illustration of a cane grower. As you can see, they originate from the ground, and it's a little crowded. Again, this is at the New York Botanical Gardens. So this is what it would look like after. I think it's the same shrub. probably a month or two, maybe a month later. So you can see that their branches are spaced nicely apart. There's not a lot of crossing branches. You don't have to remove all your crossing branches at one time. Leave some for next year. And let's see, red twig dogwood. Those beautiful stems only stay red for a year or two, and then you have to cut them down where you'll grow new ones that will be red. Otherwise, the shrub will turn pretty much brown or gray sometimes. But you would cut those to the ground, eat individual branches. Here's a calocarpa beautyberry. Whoops, maybe you could see that kind of before and then after. You can see through it. This one gets confusing. Hydrangea macrophyllus. I was just at a property this week where the gardener had come in and tip pruned everything, but the way this grows is on, the way it flowers is on the terminal bud. And I went outside, took a picture of the terminal bud on my hydrangea macrophylla today, which is just starting to open. And this is where the flower is. So when you come along and prune off all the terminal buds, thinking you're keeping the shrub nice and neat, you've just cut off all the flowers. It also happens sometimes when this starts to open, like it has, and then we get a frost, a couple of weeks from now, what's going to happen with that? That'll die, and then you also can lose your flowers. We have been known to just throw a blanket over our tender shrubs like hydrangea macrophyllus on those nights where you're going to get a hard frost. I hope that's not too confusing, but so other than not pruning the tips, but let's say this needs some pruning, how does it look after? Okay, so that's afterwards. It's a cane grower. The canes originate from the ground. Maybe you could see they've pruned it really low and they've thinned it out, but they have not cut the tips. That's where the flower will be. So you do not cut the tips. This is our method of pruning hydrangea macrophylla. Just thin it out. And if it's too wide, we'll narrow the footprint, take out all the little canes that go too far out of the footprint that you want. Too tall, take the tallest branch, follow it down, cut it way down here. The next tallest, cut it down way down here. So you started out with maybe 100 stems, you've cut 25 of them, or 33. You still have whatever, 70, 66 left. So you'll have plenty of flowers left. Okay, where would you start on that? It's crazy. Spirea also, where would we start? Down on the ground. There's no way we could figure out where to start up here. It's a cane grower, just take out canes. So actually they like it this way. This is also at the botanical gardens, but you would thin it out. And okay, tree-like, what are they? I'm going to have to move along. Viburnums, they're often specimen plants, branches that divide many times. They're woodier, more elegant, tidier habits, more tall than wide, and they have the smallest pruning budget. You may not need to prune them at all some years. Viburnums, rhododendrons, andromeda, lilac, hydrangea paniculata, and melanchia. These are just some of them. Do the same thing, same method. Dead, oldest, fattest, tallest, longest. You have to look at it and study it. And this one is a lilac. Nicely, if I was going to say this needed pruning, maybe you could tell by the color here. You could take out this one to the ground or that one to the ground. Try to rejuvenate it. A shrub is not a tree. It can grow new growth. And maybe after pruning, you want to thin out some of the, the pruning, the flowering wood. You could come up to the top and, prune out some, maybe it's getting too tall and you want the flowers down lower. Just follow the tallest one down into the canopy a bit, cut it where it meets a nice branch that can take over. and do that around the shrub. Viburnums, you can see they have cut way down here. This is a close-up of this here. So don't be afraid to take out something way down. Use your pruning saw for that. And crossing branches, so on. This rhododendron at the Botanical Gardens, if you can see, it only has about 3 stems. It originates with 3 stems, not 10 like I see many have that are just getting crowded. So that's, maybe you take out some of the stems down there, and then you take the longest branch and follow it in to where it meets a healthy branch and prune it there. And you know, the same thing here. If it's too wide, follow it in and prune it inside the shrub. If it's too tall, prune it down sporadically, and you know, step back and look and make sure you're not taking out too much from one side and not the other. Hydrangea, oak leaf hydrangeas. This is the before, and that's an after. And this is a great time of year to go to the Botanical Gardens that does great pruning, take pictures and really study their shrubs, because things haven't leafed out yet, but all their pruning is done. So you can see what good pruning looks like. Amelanchias tend to grow a lot of stems, and they cross and they rub, and they're hard to take out after a while. So this is probably an old one, but it has been thinned out. So, and if it's too tall, well, then take the longest branch, follow it down to where it meets, you know, a healthy branch, and saw it off. And Japanese maples, I'm not going to go into that too much. Cass has a great video on it. We sit underneath it and you prune from the inside out and the bottom up. Yeah, her video is pretty good on how to thin those out, make them look more architectural. This is also the one at the New York Botanical Gardens. Timing of pruning. Okay, does it bloom on old wood or new wood is the primary question. Most shrubs do bloom on old wood, meaning last year it formed a bud, and then this year it will bloom. So that would be rhododendron, all these that are listed here. So you prune those after bloom. How far after bloom? 6 weeks, I think they say, maybe 4 weeks, and try to finish your pruning after that. But some shrubs do bloom on new wood, meaning it'll grow this spring and it'll form a flower on what it grew this spring. So these are the types. And if you're not sure, does it bloom on old wood or new wood, or even how to prune something, I still search on I was pruning an apricot tree for someone yesterday. I didn't know, I hadn't done one before, so I did a little search on it, and sticks to extension sites. Every state has a land grant university, and in New York State, it's Cornell University, and they are the best sites to go on. So EXT sites, ORG sites, .gov sites. The only information you're going to get on those sites are reliable, researched information. If you go on some other sites, gardening know-how, I don't know, I don't know any bad ones in particular, but you're not necessarily getting reliable information. Magazines, Garden Illustrated, Fine Gardening, they also have, they're good, reliable sources. Botanical Gardens, good, reliable sources. Okay, so this is like your limelight, hydrangea. They kind of prune it down to it's only a few stems, nice strong stems, and then they prune the canopy down to this nice V. And from this type of pruning arrangement, it does make for a beautiful shrub come August. And here's another illustration of a short one, but it's basically pruned the same way, pretty severely. This blooms on new wood, so you can prune it severely. Roses you do now. It's and if, let's see, I know, I will say Peter Kukelski has some videos on fine gardening of how to prune roses. He was the former curator of the Peggy Rockefeller Garden, and he has a video, because I don't have the time to go into how to prune a hybrid tea, a floribunda, shrub rose, climbing rose, but he has some pretty good videos on how to prune roses, and as you can see, they've really aired them out because some of them get black spot, and having more air circulation, sunlight is the best way to avoid that. Picking up leaf litter too. Buddleias, silver plants, we like to prune in April. Okay, so March through July is when we do most of our pruning. August and September, no heavy pruning, only dead or damaged wood. Late October, we'll go out and do minor pruning to tidy things up. And winter pruning, you should prune your oaks in the winter, in the dormant season, because of oak wilt apparently is a problem here in New York. And yeah, best to do that in the winter. But the latter part of the winter is when things, tree wounds will close. It's better the latter part of the winter than the early part of the winter. And you don't do pruning in August and September because you're encouraging new wood. And if we get a frost in the early part of October, that new wood that is grown when you pruned in August and September can be damaged by the frost. And 5Ds you can do anytime. Certainly the dead you can do anytime. Okay, special cases, rehabilitative pruning. Oh, we're at 8 o'clock. All right. I added the trees because I thought that was important, but we're running a little over. If you have to go, this will be recorded, so you'll get it. But I'll stay on for as long as people have questions. Okay, radical renovation. If a shrub is in really bad shape, I tell people you could lose it, but just prune it to the ground and see what happens. The first year, allow it to grow, don't touch it. After you've done the radical pruning to the ground, second year, thin it out some. Third year, you should see some big improvement and keep thinning. And so this is a Weigela, which really needs major pruning. And this is my Master Gardener friend's 50-year-old Weigela that I think she said her mother planted, and it's beautiful. It's because it's been maintained, it's been pruned over the years, and some of these old shrubs you can't get anymore. So yeah, you need pruning. Water sprouts, as I said, they're usually the result of too much pruning, which is why you don't want to do too much pruning. They're straight up skinny growths, they don't branch, and it's best to avoid too much pruning and avoid water sprouts. If you do get them, you can cut them off. If you get a lot, you can, I think they say, prune some, prune a third, take off a third, and leave a third. So I think that's the rule. But suckers are from the ground. These are not suckers. These are water sprouts. These are suckers. They come from the root zone. And those always prune off. That's crab apples do a lot of suckering. Just remove them when you see them. Just don't damage the bark. Quickly, I'll just go through the hedges. I think this is like the last. If you want a lot of growth, prune early, because the most growth you'll get in a season is going to be now, April, a lot of growth. So anything that needs really a lot of pruning, do it early. If it's in good shape and it doesn't need a lot of reshaping, then prune that a little later, later May or June, even in July. Sheared shrubs will require more pruning than hand clipped ones, and occasionally get inside and prune out older stems. And this is apparently the better form of a hedge is a rounded top. This, I guess, can break with the snow and be problematic. And always make your hedge wider at the bottom, because sunlight has to get to the bottom. If you do this and you prune it, and I see this all the time, so this will never grow. Maybe you could prune off the top and then that would grow in, but if it's wider at the top, sunlight is not going to get to it. Ornamental pruning, I just stuck this in for fun. Some apple espaliers in Monet's garden, made a sort of a fence. Another pretty espalier to take up a bare wall. Beautiful knot garden in a garden in France, which I thought was very cool. Pyramids, I think they look great in the new naturalistic gardens. I love topiary mixed with pollinator plants, native perennials. I think it makes great statement. And oh yes, I think I saw on this website, Fred Gonsowski Garden Home. He had an illustration on how to do it with guides. So yeah, you can check out that site if you want to try that. It's takes a little technique and patience, but like I said, I like it. And this is in a really neat property in San Francisco that I think is neat too. Definitely pruned. Okay. The Madu Conservancy, they do some great pruning out there in Sagaponack. And yes, you don't use sealers anymore. They seal in fungus, they seal in pests, they seal in disease. No fungus, no pruning sealers. And this is the last one. This I think is very important. Is not it's happening more that trees are not being planted with the root flare. Nothing to do with pruning, but as a master gardener, we're seeing more of this, which is making trees unstable. So this is adding to the problem why trees fail. The root flare is buried. So always look for the root flare. And I will say I bought several trees at a good nursery in Westchester last year that had soil on top of the root flare. So you have to really excavate that soil off of there before you plant it. And also always loosen up the roots of a tree that's been in a container and may have been going around and around the container. Make sure those roots go out and not girdle the tree if you don't separate them, they will just keep growing in the same form, and they really need to anchor the tree growing sideways at ground level. Okay, so that's it. And I guess, yeah, if anybody had any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Anne. That was great. Before we get to the questions, I just wanted to tell everybody that we're having another program on gardening on Thursday, May 18th at 7 for It's Gardening in Small Spaces. Just wanted to get that out there, but that was fantastic. It was a lot of information, and I'm glad we have it recorded.